Welcome back to my channel. This is part 2, which is a continuation of Saito's adventures in the magic world. For those of you who just joined, try checking the description column to see part 1. Previously, Louise and friends managed to reveal the figure of Fuka, the sculptor who turned out to be Loungeville. They were all rewarded for their efforts at a party where Louise started to seem interested in her familiar. Then how did Saito respond to Louise? Can he return to his original world? Watch this video till the end. Henrietta invited Louise to the palace to give her the title of Chevalier, as like the plan before. As a thank you, Henrietta allowed Saito to kiss her hand, but he misunderstood and kissed the princess on the lips instead. Due to that, Saito was beaten to a pulp by Louise. The princess didn't mind it. She told the two of them to stay in the village for a while. They were given a mission to investigate the news about the noble oppressing the peasants there. Louise was forced to disguise herself as a peasant for the sake of smoothing the mission. Not only that, she had a hard time finding a place to live because it was very expensive. Instead of spending her money on important things, Louise used all her money to gamble. While they were confused about housing, a sissy, Skara, came to them and offered a place to stay, but on one condition, that Louise had to dress like a maid. While Saito was told to help Jessica wash the dishes in the kitchen, Skara will give a dress with magic that can provide unlimited income to whichever maid can get the biggest tip. Louise felt challenged hearing those words. As a noble, Louise was never ordered to let alone harassed. Her emotions were provoked and had to fail to get a tip on the first day. Saito reassured her to be more patient as it was the only way they could have a place to stay. While going to sleep, Louise was so scared that she had to sleep alone with Saito. For several days, Louise kept running into customers, who always mentioned her flat pay, making her feel irritated. Louise was getting more and more annoyed when she saw Saito alone with Jessica, who had bigger a pay than her. She immediately threw the wine bottle until Saito fainted. When he woke up, Jessica knew that Louise was a noble. It was seen from her very high self-esteem. Jessica was curious about what the two of them were doing, and would teach him anything if Saito wanted to tell her. Unexpectedly, Louise came with an annoyed face. Saito tried to explain, but it was useless. Louise's last day to collect as many tips as possible came a noble who was in charge of collecting levies in the area. If going against him meant he would put a huge retribution, even the maids there wouldn't want to deal with him. What Louise knew, the noble was very rich, and she would get a big tip from him. Instead of a tip, the noble mocked Louise for looking like a man because of her flat pay. Louise got angry and kicked the noble in the face. Saito quickly came to protect Louise from the noble's threat. Already acting cool, Saito even forgot to bring his sword that was left in the attic. As a result, Louise was forced to use her magic and confess that she was a noble. But the fat man didn't believe it. It was only after Louise showed the letter of assignment from the palace that they prostrated themselves to apologize. With the many tips left by the noble, Louise finally won the maid dress. Since their disguises had been exposed, they intended to leave, but Louise wanted to put on the maid dress and show it to Saito. On the other hand, there is a mysterious man who frees Fuka from prison. When they returned to the school, the atmosphere seemed deserted because the students were on summer vacation. Saito was greeted by Kirchi, who was going on vacation to visit Tabitha's house. On the way, there was someone who told Kirchi that the road was impassable due to the overflowing lake water. Saito was told to wash dirty clothes if he wanted to be fed by Louise. Outside, he met Goichi, who was having a quarrel with his girlfriend, Montmorency, who had trust issues with Goichi. Saito saw a giant pot and planned to use it for something. Kirchi and Tabitha had to take a detour. She saw the emblem of the Gallia royal family and suspected Tabitha was part of that family. Arriving there, Kirchi immediately asked where Tabitha's father was, but she didn't answer. From the maid, Kirchi finally found out that Tabitha's real name was Charlotte. Tabitha went to see her mother, who seemed out of her mind. The maid told Kirchi about the past of the Tabitha family. Orleans, Tabitha's father, is a mage with a charisma that is so high compared to his older brother Joseph. When the previous king died, the palace was divided into two sides to determine who was more worthy to ascend the throne. In the midst of that battle, Orleans died in a conspiracy to make Joseph able to ascend the throne as king. At a party, Someone tries to make Tabitha insane with magic potions, but all of that is blocked by her mother, who is now experiencing that in order to protect her child. After that incident, the palace gave Tabitha a very difficult task, but she managed to complete the task for her mother and for herself. Montmorency was seen making a suspicious potion. The giant pot was used by Saito to take a hot bath because he hadn't bathed in a long time. Siesta, who was curious, surprised Saito, who appeared from the water. Since she wanted to give it a try, Siesta also took a bath with Saito. Saito told about his world, which is Japan, which made Siesta a little surprised because there was only one moon and there's no mage. Montmorency seemed to be waiting for Guiche to give him the potion she had made, but when she was about to pour the potion into Guiche's drink, they were distracted by the presence of Louise, who was looking for her familiar's whereabouts. When she saw Saito taking a bath with Siesta, Louise looked annoyed and chose to return to her room. Siesta shared that her late grandfather was from another world. She thanked Saito for taking a bath together, and she also felt happy to be alone with Saito. Still feeling irritated, Louise walked over to the two of them, who were on a date, and she drank the juice or something that Montmorency had mixed with the potion. When Saito came home, Louise was ready to scold him because of the effect of the potion. Instead of being angry, Louise was honest about her feelings and expressed her heart to Saito. It turned out that the reason Tabitha came home was because the king had given her a dangerous mission. Kirchi offered to help her. The potion that Louise drank was a love potion. The effect of the potion wouldn't wear off for a month or even more, making Saito unable to carry out activities because Louise was always attached to him. Siesta, who saw their closeness, felt jealous, as did Louise, who immediately returned to her room. Although Saito had explained that Louise was like that because of the effect of the love potion, Siesta didn't believe it because whoever made the potion would be punished. Siesta went to continue her work while Saito went to the room following Louise, who was already wearing lingerie in order to seduce Saito. Instead of being aroused, Saito was uncomfortable with Louise's strangeness. He intended to return Louise to the way she was. Saito goes to see Monmon to ask for a way to heal Louise. But Monmon doesn't want to help because the main ingredients like spirit tears are so hard to get. Saito threatens Monmon to report it to the principal if she doesn't want to help him. As a result, Monmon is forced to help Saito. They made a plan to go to the Lagdorian lake along the Gallia borderland to collect the spirit tears. The following morning, they set off together with Guiche, who accompanied his girlfriend. When they got there, Monmon saw the lake's overflowing water was unusual. They had to wait until the sun sets for the spirit to appear. She used her familiar and a little of her blood to let the spirit identify who had summoned her. After waiting for a while, the spirit appears. Monmon reminds her that she has made a contract with her. Monmon tries to ask for the spirit's tears, but she refuses. Saito tries to plead, and he is willing to do anything to convince the spirit. The water spirit asked them to repel the enemy, who always attacked her people. Saito accepted the condition. Monmon was forced by Saito to get involved in the fight later. They were on standby waiting for the enemy in question. When the enemy appeared, Saito teamed up with the others to defeat the enemy. But their combined attacks were unable to defeat them, forcing Louise to intervene with magic that didn't work. Even so, her magic managed to reveal who the enemy was. It turned out to be Kirchi and Tabitha. They are forced to fight the water spirit because of the flood it causes. They face different problems with the same one source. Monmon again summons the water spirit and asks the reason for flooding the residents' settlements. Apparently it's because the treasure has been stolen by someone. The water spirit intends to flood the entire surface until the treasure returns to her people. The treasure is Anvari's ring, a magical item that can give false souls. The ring was stolen by someone named Cromwell. Saito promised to bring back Anvari's ring and hand it over to the water spirit. The water spirit believes Sato's words, making her volunteer her tears. After recovering, Louise again showed her cruel nature to Saito because she didn't forget what happened while she was under the potion. Suddenly the princess came to see them. Elsewhere, Bouquet meets her master, who turns out to be Cromwell. The princess came to them because she wanted to ask for help. Henrietta decided to marry into the Germania royal family. Although it sounded dangerous, but it was for the sake of forming an alliance to protect the Tri-Stain Kingdom. Henrietta asked Louise to retrieve the letter that had been given to the Prince Wales and the Kingdom of Albion, so that her engagement to the royal family of Germania went smoothly. At the same time, the princess also apologized for having to order Louise to go to a kingdom that was in conflict. Guiche, who heard their conversation, volunteered to help the princess. Coincidentally, the princess was also in need of additional strength. While Saito was washing Louise's panties, Siesta came to see him to apologize for not believing in the potion. Saito didn't mind it, and instead asked her about person who knew about history. Siesta told about that person who was Colbert. Saito went to meet Colbert and asked about Gundolf. It turned out to be a legendary void mage's familiar. Saito was curious about the brown liquid, which turned out to be the dragon blood that Colbert was researching. Louise looked doubtful whether she could carry out the duties of the princess or not, but Saito assured her, and he would also protect her. Before the mission started, the princess gave Louise the ring she left behind as a reward. Because of that ring, Guiche's familiar suddenly appeared because it was very interested in precious jewels such as gems. Not long after that, a man appeared and introduced himself as Henrietta's envoy, who would accompany their mission. He was Ward's. Ward said Louise was his fiancée. Saito was shocked. After a few hours of traveling, they arrived to a town in search of lodging. Louise explained to Saito that she had admired Ward since childhood. Saito felt he didn't need to say he wanted to protect Louise, because there was a stronger Ward's. During dinner, Ward's confirmed about Saito having beaten Guiche and Fuke. These two things made Ward's interested and challenged Saito to practice. Without a fear, Saito accepted the challenge. Ward's invited Louise to go to the room to have a private talk. Guiche remembered that he wanted to approach a girl he met earlier, and only Saito was lonely, making him ask Derflinger about Gundolf. It turns out that Derflinger knows about that, because Gundolf has always been his partner for 6,000 years. According to Derflinger, the mark on Sato's hand is the power to freely wield weapon, and will not work for other objects. Ward suddenly asked Louise to marry as soon as their mission was over, surprising Louise for being too hasty. As promised, Saito and Ward's did the training. Saito swung his sword against Ward's, but he was thrown off after being struck by Ward's magic attack. After his defeat, Saito pondered Ward's words that he would not be able to protect Louise. Suddenly Louise came to see Saito was crying. Saito didn't care, even seemed to hate Louise. Before leaving, Louise said that she would marry Ward's, making Sato's heart sink. Guiche picked up Saito because they were about to leave, but Fuke suddenly appeared with a giant golem. Saito and Guiche were forced to fight her. Ward's lied to Louise by saying that Saito and Guiche had returned home, then they continued the mission together. Saito and Guiche were overwhelmed by Fuke. Fortunately, Kirchi and Tabitha came to the aid, forcing Fuke to flee. Saito tried to ask where Louise was. The innkeeper said that the two of them had gone by ship. On the ship, Louise accepted Ward's marriage proposal. Although after that Louise seemed uneasy about her decision, Saito realized that Fuke had a relationship with Ward's, since she only wanted to hinder them. Ward's and Louise arrived at a secret location in the territory of the Albion Kingdom. At that place, Louise meets a man in armor. He asked Louise to put the ring together to make sure she was Henrietta's emissary. The man was the prince of the Kingdom of Albion, Wales. Louise gave a letter to the prince, as well as the prince, who left a letter for Princess Henrietta. The prince has a tough job because he has to protect his citizens from the civil war between the royal family and the nobles, who are pulled the strings by the Reconquista. When Louise came out, Ward suddenly approached her and asked her to get married right away. Louise refused, and was surprised when Ward admitted that he was a member of the Reconquista. While trying to escape, Louise was intercepted by his master, Cromwell, who used his magic on Louise. They married in the church where the prince was hiding. Just before the marriage was officially established, Saito came and shouted loudly that brought Louise to her senses. Saito managed to find their location thanks to Guiche's familiar who smelled Louise's gem. Have a chance. Prince was killed by Ward's. Immediately he gave his ring to Louise. At that place, a duel took place between Ward's and Saito. Saito did not accept that Louise was being toyed with by Ward's. The mark in his hand emits a light that makes Derflinger transform into a stronger one and can absorb magic. Ward's almost died after fighting Saito, but because the task to kill the prince and the mission to get the letter had been successful, he chose to destroy the place in order to escape from there. Just in time, Tabitha and Kirchi came to save them using magic. Under the moonlight, Louise recalled the fond memories of Ward's, who had been replaced by Saito. Louise immediately went to the princess to report her failed mission to bring the letter that was entrusted by the Prince Wales. Henrietta was also saddened by what had happened. She also reported her mission to the principal, who was giving Colbert a vacation, because he wanted to go somewhere to research the legendary dragon or something. Louise reported about the Reconquista organization and their actions that caused the Civil War. Not only that, she also asked Osmond about the Descendant of the Void. According to Osmond, the Descendant of the Void was a long-lost legendary magic element, and it also had a close relationship with Gundulf. Louise was confused and thought that if Saito was Gundulf, then she was the Descendant of the Void. But that's impossible, she thinks. Saito entered the room, which made Louise startled and looked uncharacteristically embarrassed. Louise's panties suddenly sagged. Saito just remembered when he washed the panties the elastic part was broken, but he still washed them. As a result, Saito was tortured and kicked out of Louise's room. When Saito vented his frustration, Siesta approached him and said that she wanted to return home to the village. Because Siesta's great-grandfather was from the other world, Saito wanted to hear the story of how he arrived in the magic world. Saito wanted to find clues on how to return to his world. Siesta said that her great-grandfather came with 2 dragons. One dragon disappeared under a solar eclipse, and the other was kept as a family heirloom. Curious, Saito wanted to go with Siesta back to her hometown. Kerchi and Guiche, who heard that, were also interested in quietly following them. Louise, who was looking for Saito, accidentally saw Saito go alone with Siesta. Louise find out where Siesta was going, and she knows that Siesta was going home to her village. In short, Saito and Siesta arrived at her hometown, Tao Village. Siesta immediately helped Saito to get a hint about the dragon. While Colbert will be there soon, after Saito got the hint, the 3 of them suddenly appeared to join Saito. The hint led them to a cave elsewhere. Cromwell succeeded in a coup against the Kingdom of Albion after the Prince Wales was killed. They started exploring the cave. The sound of someone's footsteps came from behind, who turned out to be Colbert and Louise. Having the same goal, they decided to look for the dragon together. After walking quite a distance, they managed to find the place they were looking for. There was a stone tablet with Japanese writing on it, the country or world where Saito came from. What was even more surprising was, within the building contained the dragon they were looking for. It turned out that the dragon was a fighter plane. Colbert assumed that Saito could go home using the plane. According to Colbert, when a solar eclipse takes place, there is one dragon that can return to its original world with the right timing. While Siesta's great-grandfather couldn't come back because he lost the moment, and finally the plane was kept as his heirloom. Louise looked uneasy hearing that. On the other hand, the royal family of Germania called off the engagement with the princess, but the queen could not regret what had happened, especially after her nephew, the Prince of Wales, died. Some time later, the plane was taken to Tristane's school. Saito remembered the liquid that Colbert had made. It wasn't dragon blood but gasoline. Colbert just needed to make more gasoline for the plane's engine to work. Louise looked gloomy and uneasy knowing Saito would leave her. Guiche suddenly appeared with the bad news that the Albion Kingdom had been taken over by the Reconquista and declared war on the Tristane Kingdom. On the other hand, Cromwell is planning to conquer the entire continent. As a first step, he will fight the Tristane Kingdom. Moreover, he is confident because he has the Anvares ring, which he stole from the water spirit. Saito bid farewell as he would return to his world 3 days later during a solar eclipse. Louise felt happy even though she was actually lying to her feelings. Meanwhile, the Queen and the rest of the royal family are in a meeting to prepare for war against the Reconquista. Under direct orders from Princess Henrietta, she ordered the closure of the Tristane school for a while. Hearing that Henrietta would lead the war, made Louise plan to join the war. When she got home, Saito was already asleep. After he woke up, he got a letter from Louise. Because he didn't understand the language, he asked Derflinger to translate it. The point of the letter was that Saito had been fired. The same thing when Kerchi read the letter to him. Saito was surprised to learn that Louise would join the war against the Reconquista to help the princess. The following day, Siesta was surprised by the presence of a warship that arrived at the village of Taub. The news quickly reached the ears of the queen, Henrietta intending to reclaim the village of Taub. Colbert brought gasoline to fuel the plane so that Saito could return to his world. The princess and her army arrived at the village of Taub, and were surprised to see the enemy army, which had many dragons, as if it was not comparable to their army. Saito was finally able to fly the plane after he was helped by Tabitha's magic. The two of them flew after Saito. The war between the Tri-Stain Army and the Reconquista Army finally started. The Tri-Stain Army seemed to have a hard time facing them. A few moments later, Saito came along with a solar eclipse that was about to occur, but Saito chose to turn around and defeat the entire dragon army because of Sato's actions, forcing Ward's and Phuket to intervene against him. Saito managed to absorb Ward's magic thanks to Derflinger, but when he wanted to counterattack, he ran out of ammo. Phuket appeared with a giant golem. She looked down on them. Tabitha wasn't afraid to face her because she had an idea. Thanks to Geish's magic and Kerchi's fire attacks, the golem was destroyed, forcing Phuket to flee. Seeing Saito being pushed down by Ward's attack, Louise invited Tabitha and Kerchi to help him. Louise desperately jumped up to accompany Saito. Ward's didn't want to give up so easily. He kept trying to attack Saito. At that time, the mark on Sato's hand glowed, but this time it was different from before. This time, the mark was able to connect with Louise and awaken her as a mage of the void, Gundalf's partner. The true power of the mage made Ward and his entire army vanish. Saito was forced to make an emergency landing because the plane had been destroyed, as well as the solar eclipse that had ended. Kerchi and Tabitha accidentally meet Cromwell, who wanted to escape. He wanted to make them both prisoners, but luckily Goiche was on time to help him. Louise was relieved to not be left by Saito. Then she kissed him, but she argued that it was a sign of a new contract. After the war ended, those who contributed to the war received titles from the palace. The storyline of this anime is quite interesting in my opinion. Magic with isekai is like Nobita and Doraemon, two things that can't be separated. But magic with an appearance that is packaged like Harry Potter makes this anime a little different. Added with a little comedy spice makes the story not boring. So what do you think? That's the recap of the Familiar Zero Season 1. If you like this anime, write in the comments column, then I will continue Season 2 for you. Have a nice day, and please check out my other videos if you don't mind.